it's altogether proper, I think, that we are talking about Article 1 today, 1 through 7, because with the healthcare bill, which I know you've all been following very carefully, a lot of this part of the Constitution comes into play. And there's some interesting irony. You've been following the discussion. They're trying to use this deem and pass system, right? Which people rightly have argued, well, that's totally unconstitutional, and it is. And they say, well, there's some other parts that are unconstitutional, but the irony is the whole thing is unconstitutional. We're going to talk about Article 1, Section 8, starting next month, and that's the enumerated powers part, and that tells Congress what kind of laws they can pass. And if you read that, there's nothing vaguely close to health care in it. Okay? So why don't they talk about that? Nobody says the whole thing is unconstitutional. Why? Because we've just, unfortunately, started to accept the idea that the federal government can do whatever they want, and they can't.
What about the part in that section where it says general welfare? What do you think about that?
We'll have a long discussion about that, but there's general welfare is mentioned in two parts. We talked about the preamble, where it says to promote the general welfare. And remember, that's the preamble. It doesn't grant any powers. It just tells what's going to happen. And then general welfare also appears in Article 1, Section 8, in the very first clause about taxing. Okay? And what it says is they can tax to spend for general welfare. The important word there is general, not welfare. What it means is any money that they get has to be used across the entire country. You couldn't collect tax money and use it for some special, limited purpose, like bailing out a bank or an automobile company. That violates the general welfare because we all didn't get a chunk of the money, or all the states didn't get a chunk of the money. Okay, so you're right, they tend to fall back on, well, general welfare. If you accept that, they can do anything they want. Absolutely anything, because every law will be supposedly for the general welfare. George?
The term welfare at this time did not have anywhere near the meaning because it really was general goodness.
Yes, or happiness. Yeah, exactly right. It's not welfare in the sense that we use welfare today.
Ron, if he says something, repeat it, because those folks down there are older than I am.
Yeah.
I do have a microphone if you wait for me to get it to you.
Yep. Go ahead, George, say it again.
Boom. That's not booming.
It's all right.
All right. No, what I said was the word welfare at that time did not mean anything like we think of now. And it really just meant goodness, or like Ron said, happiness. So they can, the idea behind the Constitution and behind being able to pass bills was to promote the general, so not specific to a state, but general goodness, the general happiness of the nation.
Yep. This question came up in virtually all of the ratifying conventions in the states, okay, when they were discussing whether to vote for or against this Constitution. And people said, well, you have that general welfare clause in there that gives the federal government all this power that's unrestricted. And in each case, the people who were for it said, like James Madison, no, 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 no. Clearly, right, when we said general welfare, we then went on and enumerated what that meant. Okay? There's no intent to go beyond those enumerated powers. And it was ratified on the basis of that in all of the states. That was a big question. So the people who ratified it understood it to mean just the general welfare involved in the enumerated powers. And it's been changed by a series of court decisions, no surprise, starting in the 30s under the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. Okay? And sometime when we get through all of this, we can maybe go back and talk about how the Constitution has been so perverted by Supreme Court decisions and political maneuvering as well.